Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is November 19th, 2014. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday edition. When we're not here, you can always get our information at www.arh.noaa.gov, or you can also call our weather information line at 1-800-472-0391. And as always, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Now on to the hot topics of the day. And just bear with me a moment. All right, here we are. On the northern coast, we have a blizzard watch that's out in effect today from 6 p.m. through Thursday at 6 p.m. Beware for reduced visibility, snow and blowing snow all along the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast, with a blowing snow advisory across the Barrow area, as they are going to see some very they're going to see whiteout conditions overnight tonight and then taper off late on Thursday. So we're expected that will expire at 6 p.m. Winds will be gusting up there between 30 and 40 miles per hour, with higher gusts to 55 miles per hour. Visibilities will get down to 1 mile or less at times during the overnight and hours into Thursday. Now looking at a few more headlines. Bear with me as we move on to the next screen here. Well, headlines for today. Sorry, we're having some problems with our advancing slide. So let me just go over really quick what the headlines are today. Obviously, we have blizzard warnings up in the northeastern sector of the state. And then we have some rain across Kodiak, which puts rain into the 5th place currently. They've received 12.2 inches of rain so far this month. And we're going to be on to the next storm system that possibly will put them in 4th place. Now on to the satellite pictures to see what was out there this afternoon. Out towards the Bering area, you can see a large area of clouds. These are higher clouds, mainly just a weak ridging across the western areas there, and low pressure, the jet streams just south of the Aleutian chain, with a low pressure across the southern areas of the Bering. And putting this into motion, you can see this plume of moisture that's streaming off towards the east, and here's a little bit of a curl in the center of this system. Putting that into motion one more time, you can see how this low pressure system is becoming well developed, with a new center to the south of the eastern Aleutians. Now looking at a shot closer to home. All right, here we are. And then we had some weak high pressure ridging across the eastern areas of the Gulf of Alaska. Here's the next low pressure system that'll be the focus for the overnight hours, and a lot of cloud cover over the northern areas of Alaska. So there's a lot of moisture available there for the system that has moved up into the northern Brooks Range earlier today. And in advance, you can see this next system that's moving up towards the Alaska Peninsula. That'll be on its way during the overnight hours, staying on this northerly track, with a weak frontal boundary out ahead of it, brings some rain already into the southern Kodiak area. Now looking at the weather for today, we had some clearing across the eastern areas of the Gulf of Alaska. Rain was mainly across the southeastern areas, keeping the southeast quite warm and wet, with a warm surge of air that had moved up towards the Dixon entrance. Across the interior areas of the state, a little bit drier here with very cold temperatures. Snow and blowing snow all across the northern sector of the state, back towards the northwest. So blowing snow all along these areas, with the most the highly affected areas being across the Beaufort Sea coast back towards Barrow. And across the western areas of the state, some low clouds, breaks in the clouds as well, with another low pressure system that's moving up from the northern Pacific. This occluded front is currently just located to the just south of the Alaska Peninsula now, with colder air mass coming across the overall low pressure that's out here in the Bering, with cooler air on the backside bringing the colder air mass, but not terribly cold enough. As you can see, I still have some rain showers painted across the area. Across the northern Gulf coastal areas, we saw a mix of rain and snow, with snow in the higher elevations bring some snow blankets back to the area mountains along the coast. So as we head into your forecast for tonight, the main focus is going to be on this next storm system, which is going to be bringing very gusty winds between 30 and 40 miles per hour, with higher gusts up to 50 miles per hour around this low pressure center over the water. And then along the western Gulf waters, we'll see some rain continuing to develop on that weak prefrontal push, with the bulk of the rain staying around the low pressure center. Some light shower activity will continue across the Bering area tonight, otherwise quiet there. Across the southeast, we have some break along the eastern areas, with this rain continuing to linger during the overnight hours, making everything wet along the coastal areas. And for this, we need to be advised that with the temperatures dropping so close to the freezing levels across the surface, we're going to have some issues with slick road conditions, and that's going to be all across the south central areas where it had warmed up, and they saw quite a bit of rain, between 1/2 to 1.5 inches of rain earlier today. Across the southeastern areas, they're going to break out at some point tonight, and they'll possibly develop some fog during the overnight hours after they clear out, and wet conditions also will cause possibly icy conditions here as well. Across the northern areas, of course, the blowing snow will be the concern. Up to 2 inches of snow is expected, with the snow and the boundary that's across the northern Brooks Range back towards the northwest. Not as much snow, but still showery conditions, snow showers all the way back towards the Seward Peninsula. Across the southwest, some light showers, a mix of rain and snow here, and possible icy conditions in areas where they had seen some rain pull up through the Aleutian Mountains here, the Aleutian Range. Now, as we head into your forecast for tomorrow, looking at Thursday, we have this front that's continuing to push to the north and bring those very gusty conditions through the Kodiak Island back towards the Alaska Peninsula, southern Bering area. So this is going to certainly be a flying concern as well, and we'll get to that just in a moment. We'll still have some mix of rain and snow across parts of south central, with a drying area along the northern panhandle, and the interior will see a little bit drier pattern. The southeast is going to be in between systems as low pressure begins to weaken. Possible light rain during the morning hours, with some snow showers along the higher elevations there in the morning, should taper off ahead of this next system on its way. Across the northeastern areas, expect snow to continue, blowing snow. You can see this gradient is very tight across the northern coast here, and that's going to continue to persist through Thursday. Across the western coast, a little bit drier, but still continuing to see snow showers. A cooler air mass across the western areas of the Bering, with some light showery activity continuing, and patchy fog, but rain showers still will continue, as the air mass is not going to be quite cold enough to bring snow to this area. As we head into the day on Friday, this low pressure is going to be pulled up north into the southern Bering, brings some showery conditions across the Alaska Peninsula. Bulk of the rain is going to be making it up towards the northern coast at this point. So we'll see rain across this frontal system that will go through the southeast, bringing quite a bit of rain, again between 1/2 inch up to 1 inch of rain, and possibly more in areas. And then again, having this problem with the mixed precipitation across the south central areas. So be on the lookout for some icy conditions to develop again on your Friday morning as we get this front to pull up into the southern areas. We'll see some gusty winds all across the northern ends of this low pressure system with a very tight gradient across the central areas of the Bering. So gusty winds all the way back around this system. Across the central interior, probably see some winds moving up towards the Alaska range here with some light snow shower activity with the initial prefrontal push there. Some showery conditions also continuing across the northern areas of the state, and fog continuing with blowing snow conditions through your Friday. Now looking at your temperatures from today, very cold across the central interior, staying in the teens today with the coldest temperatures up here near Barrow, 12 degrees. The warmest areas of the state today were across the southeast, with temperatures at Annette getting up to 50 degrees and Heidelberg saw 50 today, but mainly dropping quickly into the lower 40s. Now heading on to the next slide. You can see the temperatures have gotten very cold in the interior areas, with temperatures only reaching up to -2 and 10, 19 degrees, 17 degrees. Fairbanks stayed rather cold. All these areas under 20 degrees, and then back towards the northwestern areas in the lower 20s with a very quick climb into the lower 30s to lower 40s along the southwestern coast. Temperatures also warmed up to near 50 around Homer earlier today. And then looking at the next slide, sorry, that advanced. Anyways, temperatures across the southwestern areas mainly were in the lower 30s today, with a warm air mass just pulling up here along the Aleutian range, and temperatures mainly in the upper 30s to lower 40s across the Aleutians. So for tonight, those temperatures aren't going to range much across the Aleutians, mainly in the mid to upper 30s, and then across the southwestern areas expect temperatures in the lower 30s. Across the eastern areas of the state, very cold all the way up through the northern tier in the teens to single digits. Now across the coastal areas expect that borderline temperature near 25 to 35 degrees all along the coastal areas, and dropping a little bit cooler even across the southeast towards the Panhandle. Now looking at, going back into your aviation weather. Let me advance the slide just a moment. All right, here we go. Tomorrow's flying weather. You can see that there's MVFR conditions across much of the state, with possible IFR in the western coastal areas as this front moves up, and we'll have to look out for that patchy fog that develops with the frontal systems. We might see some IFR, MVFR conditions in the morning, lifting in the afternoon. And then of course across the northern coastal areas, there'll be an IFR to MVFR conditions through the day, and all across the Bering areas with low pressure out there. Now looking at your passes in more depth, Adigan and Inutuvik Pass will be MVFR in the morning, possibly the southern passes clearing to VFR in the afternoon. And then next we have Lake Clark, Merrill Pass, MVFR going to VFR for a break in the afternoon. Rainy Pass will stay MVFR much of your day. Windy Pass will be MVFR to VFR. Isabel will be MVFR to VFR. And then we'll see Mentasta MVFR to possibly VFR in the afternoon. And then Tanita Pass will be MVFR to VFR. Looking at our next pass, Portage passes, mainly going to be MVFR in the morning, possible IFR as well with fog developing, and then MVFR to VFR later in the afternoon for Chilkoot and White Pass once they clear out. Now on to the next slide, we'll see the freezing levels are still along the western coast and right along the northern Gulf coastal areas back towards the southeast. So that's going to be where our problem areas are going to be with the freezing precipitation, and then 2,000 to 4,000 foot freezing levels across the Bering and the Gulf of Alaska, and up to 6,000 as you head towards the Dixon entrance. Now looking at your icing conditions, mainly around the low pressure system that's approaching the Alaska Peninsula, with widespread moderate conditions along the southern end of Kodiak towards the Alaska Peninsula. Also icing will be possible across the Bering, above 8,000 feet out here, between 6 to 12,000 feet across the Alaska Peninsula and western half of the Gulf of Alaska, and below 5,000 feet with icing along the system to the north. Looking at your jet stream for tomorrow, the jet stream really stays well south between 130 to 145 knots, with a weak system that's driving that low pressure system to the north here. So looking at your 9,000 foot level, we'll see low pressure right across the Alaska Peninsula here, with the strongest winds coming in across the western Gulf and into the southwest between 45 and 50 knots, and then a northerly flow across the Bering, southerly flow across the Gulf, much of the Gulf, and easterly flow across the northern tier of the state, with interior rather benign easterly flow between 15 and 25 knots. Same setup at this closer to the surface at 3,000 feet. We have 45 to 65 knot winds across the Aleutian Range here, and then northerly flow around 20 knots across the Bering, and then more of a southerly and easterly flow across the eastern areas of the state and the southeast. Now looking at your turbulence for tomorrow, mainly below 5,000 feet here across the southwest, with Kodiak possibly seeing moderate conditions, and then along the north with the other system below 5,000 feet up there as well. And in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Atmospheric researchers have confirmed that the Arctic haze, a polluted air mass that forms each winter over the Arctic region, is widespread and deep, increasing scientific interest about its effect upon the climate. In 1983, scientists aboard a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration research aircraft took airborne samples of the haze. From the atmosphere above the Brooks Range in northern Alaska. And over Barrow, Alaska. Flying through the haze at altitudes from 50 to 28,000 feet, the researchers analyzed the chemical structure of samples collected by instruments on the plane. A preliminary air sample analysis by Dr. R.A. Rasmussen of Oregon Graduate Center indicates the haze largely is composed of a chemical compound, PCE, and hydrocarbons from fossil fuel combustion. This tends to substantiate the theory that the haze is caused by atmospheric pollutants being carried into the Arctic from principally Europe and northern Asia.
12. CN dropping off. We just passed through an incredibly thick layer, went off scale on the ethylometer. It also is dropping off now on the NEF. Now we're coming back into, look at it, we're coming into another layer. And you'll be picking it up in a minute. I'll pick it up in 1 minute. Yeah. So we're coming, the CN is coming in. It's just as good as the other one. Look at it. The NEF is starting to pick it up.
Well, this is our trace here. This was the previous layer.
Fantastic. Oh, no, just the thin one. It's falling off again. See?
I went completely off scale.
Good. See, that's fantastic. No, this is just a little patch. See it fall off again?
Okay, now.
Went through a clean area. Now we're coming back into another patch. You'll be picking it up shortly. Well, the NEF is coming up again, too. Okay, it's really patchy.
There we are.
There, see? Look at it. Look at it climb.
Yeah.
Hey, fantastic.
We had a rather diffuse layer with not very strong concentration. Here we saw a rather stronger layer. I was then able to reduce the resolution time of the instrument. And then here we saw an incredibly thick layer, back down to nothing down there. Oh, gee. Hey, hold it. That's 8, 10, 11. 11 counts. Here we are now in another very strong layer here, and I hope if my instrument goes off scale again,
Hey, the nest is climbing higher than it's ever been now. Just whacked off scale again.
Yeah, I know. Pretty low already. We're at 100 meters.
We're gonna go lower.
Time 23:47. We're holding in the haze now at 952 meters. We passed through descending at about 3 minutes ago, and now we're back up into it, holding steady right in the center of the haze.
This filter is so-called millipore filter. All of the air was restricted to go through the center by means of the plastic mask. You can see the black spot in the center is the deposit of particles. We can analyze these by a variety of chemical and physical means to study the carbon, both the black carbon and also any organic type of carbon.
Heading the score of scientists on the NOAA study is Dr. Russell Schnell.
Okay, we found the haze layers to be more numerous than anticipated, and the intensity of the pollution exceedingly larger than anyone had expected. And finally, the pollution was spread over much larger areas than we had originally thought.
Flight data will be used in developing improved climate models for determining the effect of the haze on the Arctic climate.
Welcome back to the show, and now on to your marine forecast. Taking a quick look at today's sea ice, still covered across the north, of course, and then along the Bering Strait, still some open water here with the ice all along the coastal areas back towards the Kuskokwim Delta. Taking a look at the southeast, we're going to see some northerly flow across the northern Lynn Canal, 15 knots. Weaker winds tomorrow around 15 knots. The outer water, we'll see an offshore flow between 10 and 20 knots. Seas along the inner channels will be 3 feet. And then we'll see 10-foot seas primarily across the outer waters. Now on to your Friday forecast, looking for primarily a change in direction eventually out of the southeast across the inner channels with northerly flow staying across the northern Lynn Canal at 25 knots. Seas here on this day will be between 5 and 6 feet across the inner channels. The outer waters will see gale force winds across the eastern waters out of the east direction, and then towards the Dixon entrance it'll be changing out of the south to southeast flow here. And on to the south central forecast. For Thursday is going to be primarily east and northeast direction, and then we'll see gales widespread across the area, and then the seas across the Cook Inlet will be between 6 and 11 feet with 13 to 14 feet across the Baranof Islands, Shelikof Strait, and then the western Gulf areas will range between 11 to 18 feet. Highest south of Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound will see 3-foot seas for Thursday, and then for your Friday forecast, a little bit change in direction of winds here out of the south to southeasterly direction across the western areas of the Gulf with winds around 20 to 30 knots. And other than the gales across the northern waters here out of the southeast, and then across the Cook Inlet, a flow out of the north here and east towards the Shelikof Strait, small craft between 20 and 30 knots on your Friday, with seas between 4 and 8 feet across the Cook Inlet down towards Shelikof Strait, between 7 and 9 feet across the western Gulf waters. We'll see between 15 and 20-foot seas. And now on to your Alaska Peninsula forecast for your Thursday, primarily an easterly flow with gale warning out for all areas. And then on your Friday forecast, expect change in direction and that's going to be out of the west for just south of the Alaska Peninsula, and still hanging on to a gale for the Bristol Bay area out of the east, seas between 8 and 12 feet and 15 to 16 feet across the Pacific side. Now onto your Aleutian Islands. Expect primarily a northwesterly flow to west for the western central Aleutians, and then a change of wind directions out of the northwest to northeast towards the eastern Aleutians. Seas on this day is going to be between 7 and 14 feet on the Bering side, and then between 10 and 15 feet on the Pacific side. Looking at your Friday forecast, we'll see primarily a northerly flow, small craft across the entire area. Seas will be between 11 and 14 feet, with the highest seas towards the eastern Aleutians. Now on to your western forecast. Looking at primarily an offshore flow, east to northeast direction, small craft except for the Pribilof Islands, a little bit weaker here, and gales towards the Nunavik Island. Seas will be between 5 and 10 feet, and then for your Friday, very similar wind pattern with a north to northeasterly flow on Friday. We'll also see seas about the same for your Friday on the western coast. Now moving on to the northern areas, we'll see 30 to 40 knot winds all across the Arctic coastal areas back towards Kotzebue Sound, change of direction out of the southeast here. And then we'll see brisk winds across the area, 5 to 6 feet on the seas with heavy freezing spray for your Friday forecast. Looking at a very similar pattern, around 35 knots across the Arctic areas and out of the northeasterly direction on this day, with heavy freezing spray once again, seas between 5 and 6 feet. Now for a quick recap for your forecast tonight, expect some icy conditions along the south central areas with areas that received rain, possibly freezing overnight. Very foggy conditions across the coastal areas, and a low pressure system heading up for Kodiak Island, and blizzard warnings across the northern tier of the state. Thanks.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.